everyone, and welcome to WSET's webinar for today, Decoding a Wine List. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Christine Kamine. I hold the WSET diploma. I'm also a business development manager in WSET Americas. And I'm currently based in Los Angeles, California, where it's about 5 p.m. on Thursday. And today we have with us Gerard Higgins, who is currently based in Australia in the Hunter Valley. So it's Friday for all of our attendees who are anywhere near Gerard today. Gerard Higgins is a sommelier and wine consultant from Sydney, Australia. Gerard was born and raised in New South Wales's Hunter Valley, where he's currently visiting. And he has an 11-generation family history in the wine industry, but he's now a senior brand ambassador for Pernod Ricard Winemakers, EMEA Business Acceleration and Education Team. Prior to this role, Gerard spent 10 years honing his tasting skills, working as a sommelier at some of Sydney's best Michelin-level fine dining restaurants before moving to Stockholm, Sweden, where he's usually based, in early 2017. Gerard holds the WSET diploma in wines and spirits and is a stage 2 candidate with the Institute of Masters of Wine. So Gerard, thank you so much for joining us today to chat all about wine lists.
Thanks for having me, Christine. It's a pleasure to be chatting to WSET.
Fantastic. Well, Jen, we wanted to have this webinar, Valentine's Day is coming up. There's lots of people dining out, whether that's with your partner, your significant other, or just any situation where you're dining out at restaurants. So I have a couple of questions prepared to ask you with all your fine dining and restaurant experience, and also your work with Pernod Ricard and recommending wines to people all over the world. So we can jump right into it and have a conversation. For anyone who's joining us, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And if we have the time, we will answer as many as we can. So Jen, let's jump right into it. If a table of guests is deciding between ordering several glasses of wine versus a bottle, what would you typically suggest?
Well, there's a few options that people can go down, I guess, Christine. A wine list written by a sommelier should always have been consciously put together. So the wines by the glass usually tell a story, and I would say seek to offer people wines or flavors or different types of experiences from all over the world. So if a group of people are looking for different things, maybe eating different dishes, wine by the glass is generally a great option to go by if it's been consciously chosen by the somm. Otherwise, wines by the bottle can offer usually a little bit more depth or interest in other parts of the world. Generally, there's a restriction on the types of wines that you can offer by the glass. Usually that's a price restriction. So if people are feeling a little bit more adventurous or want to spend a little bit more money on a bottle, bottles are usually the best place to go. So it depends on what your aims are as a drinker, or what your company's aims are. But generally they fulfill different purposes.
Yeah, I find I usually go for a bottle when I'm looking to explore a bit more, especially if it's a long and an intricate list that gets me excited. So
yeah,
yes, I think it depends on the evening.
Yeah, it's also about knowing the sommelier at the place that you're going to as well. If it's a destination list, a place that's known for its wine, then maybe exploring wine by the bottle is the right thing to do in that case.
Yeah, certainly. Do you have any tips for decisions you can make or research you can do before you actually go to dinner to make the wine selection a little bit easier once you arrive?
It depends how committed you are, I guess, as a diner. So if you're a geek like me, and if the restaurant that you're going to has their list posted on the website, which a lot of restaurants do these days, some of them omit pricing just for commercial sensitivity, but that's a really good place to start. So looking on the internet to see if you can find the list, even just going through a Google search, sometimes people will have taken photos of the list for you to have a quick look through. That can save a lot of time at the table. If wine is something that you are interested in, I know I'm guilty of it. Sometimes you can find yourself sort of being absorbed in the wine list and not in the conversation. So yes. Doing a little bit of research beforehand doesn't hurt.
Yes, I think I've certainly been there where I'm trying to hold a conversation and also peruse the list, and having that, a little bit of a heads up beforehand makes you a more enjoyable dining companion, I think,
Yeah.
as well.
Definitely. Nobody, especially if there's two of you on Valentine's Day, no one likes their Valentine's Day date sort of stuck in the wine list and not in conversation. So it's sort of doing your research is sort of a respectful thing as well, especially within a couple.
Yeah, certainly. So what are some ways that a wine list can or typically is organized? And do you think there are any clues you can get about a bottle from its position on the list?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. Generally, it depends again on the restaurant and whether the restaurant has hired a dedicated wine service professional, be it somebody who considers themselves a sommelier or somebody with a wine specialty. In that case, you're probably likely to come across a wine list that is not organized by price, that's organized by regions or the way a wine tastes, textures, style, weight, things like that. But in general, the default mode for a wine list is price, from cheapest to most expensive. And where wine lists are organized by price, that can offer the drinker quite a few clues as well for drinking. So if you turn up to a restaurant and you're confronted by a list that's just organized by price, cheapest to most expensive, generally, the cheaper bottles won't have influences of oak. There'll be more fruity styles that have been fermented in stainless steel, so fresh, lighter options. And the further you go down the price list, sort of the more oak influence, the more richness you'll get in the glass. Now, reason for that being, oak barrels in the winery are very expensive, and that is usually reflected in the price. So it's quite difficult to find a cheap wine by the glass that doesn't have oak influence. Sorry, it's quite a cheap wine by the glass that does have oak influence, rather. Sorry, the inverse of what I was saying initially. And likewise, seldom will you find a very expensive wine that doesn't have that barrel influence. So it's a good way of thinking about it. If you're after fruity, fruit forward styles, generally the cheaper end of the list will be good for you. If you like oak influence, generally you might have to spend a few more dollars. Otherwise, people organize lists by region, by style, and in general, that's usually at a place where they have a dedicated wine professional. So the best way to help you navigate your way around that list is to have a conversation. And generally, people are quite proud of the lists that they put together. So pulling the sommelier over for a chat is the best way to go about things, I think.
Yeah, I think, when I have friends who ask me, what bottle to pick at a restaurant, I always tell them, ask the som, ask whoever's in charge of the list, because they know how it's organized and they can help you, find exactly what you're looking for better than someone who's not as familiar could ever do. So yeah, it's good advice. So kind of going off that, we just talked about, the list is usually organized by price. I think price can be a touchy topic when people are ordering a bottle out, whether you're with a romantic partner or a business lunch, any reason, price can be difficult. So when you're communicating a budget, how can you communicate a price range to your server or som without announcing it to the whole table? What are some of your tips that you might have had from your days working in restaurants?
Well, if you don't want to announce the price to the whole table, obviously, some people are very invested in announcing the price to show people how much they're spending. Price, I think before I talk about how to do it, I think it's worth mentioning that price is a super important part of the conversation with a sommelier, if that person does exist, just because it means you're giving the person who's serving you a guide as to sort of how much they can allow you to spend on a bottle of wine. So don't be scared to talk about price. You don't specifically need to mention prices, but saying, I would like a bottle of wine around this sort of price is a really great way to help your server. Now, in terms of how to communicate price without actually mentioning price, the beauty of wine lists is you can't see through them. So they're fully opaque. And if you've got a wine list in front of you and your guest is sitting opposite you or beside you and they sort of can't see through the cover of that wine book, you can point at a price on the page and say to your server, I would like something around this price, without revealing what that price actually is.
Brilliant.
So by just pointing at a price on the page, I'm thinking something around this price to your server, then you are accurately communicating the amount of money that you are willing to spend. You're giving them a good idea of what they're to go and look for. And you're also providing them the opportunity to offer suggestions on some other pages as well, if the wine list is quite comprehensive.
Yeah, that's having the wine list be opaque is a good thing for all of us, I think. And I find when I'm dining out too, servers are usually pretty cognizant that people don't want the price they're looking at announced to the rest of the table. So I think, they're usually good at being sneaky about it. And I find too, I think people are sometimes concerned that if they show a price, the server, the som will recommend something, around that or higher. And I find a lot of times people even recommend something lower if it's more in line of what I was looking to drink based on the description I've given them. So I agree. I think having that conversation is, it can sometimes be intimidating to people, but I think it only helps you find exactly what you want. And usually the servers wants to help as well.
Yeah, a good server will usually recommend things around the price that you're asking for, something higher and something lower. And there's a few questions that are popping up just here on the side, which I think is a really good a really good time to address these. Will the som really guide you as the server looking to get rid of a wine that they've got a lot of stock of? It's all about trust at the end of the day. So if you really are into wine and you're going into a place to explore a wine list, it's great to build up a sense of rapport and a sense of trust with that server. Like any business, there's always going to be dodgy guys looking to get rid of wine on the cheap. But with a little bit of research, finding wine dedicated venues, generally you can filter those places out quite quickly. So build that relationship up with the sommelier or the wine team or the maitre d' in the restaurant, and you're more likely to have a better experience in a place like that. Yeah.
I think another thing kind of going off that is people want you to return to their restaurant. So if you go and someone's really upselling you or chooses a wine that they're trying to get rid of that wasn't in line with what you described to them, you're probably not going to return to the restaurant. So I think exactly what you're talking about. They want to build trust with you as well, and recommending a wine that's within your price range and to your taste. And the style you want is important for the restaurant as well, if they're doing their job well.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, as a person who has run restaurants in the past, regular business and having regular clientele is the most important way for a hospitality business to make money. So it's within the restaurant's best interests, essentially, not to be trying to push lower quality products off onto the consumer. So it's all about trust. And in general, that's what people, I guess, are about, building relationships. That's what we're about in the hospitality industry, the wine industry. Relationships are really important. So it's great if customers come in wanting to build those relationships as well.
Wonderful. So continuing on communication tips, do you have any tips for communicating the style that you like? For example, if I like a Chenin Blanc from the Loire, what descriptors should I use, or any other style to kind of key in your sommelier or your server what you're looking for?
Well, I think this is a great opportunity to plug WSET's really fantastic courses.
I would agree.
Yeah, exactly. Even the level 1 for WSET will give you some key terms that you need to communicate what you're looking for in a glass of wine. But failing that, if you haven't been through WSET and you signed up for a course but maybe haven't completed it, the best way to explain to a server what you like is telling them what wine you have in the fridge at home at the moment, or what wine you drank at home most recently. So I'd say that most people who are looking to drink wine in a restaurant also have that old faithful bottle of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc or Rioja or something at home that they like to drink. So don't be ashamed of that. Let the server know, this is what I drink on a Tuesday night. What else can you recommend that will look similar?
good advice. It'll help you kind of go out of your comfort zone while still staying in a style that you're familiar and comfortable and enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, the sommelier's job is to have their guests enjoy their dining experience. So seldom will you find a sommelier that's going to want to throw you in the deep end of a weird and wacky style. And if you unfortunately do stumble across that kind of som, they're probably not particularly good at their job. So communicating what you like is, I think, the best way for them to find something that's similar, but maybe something that you haven't tried before.
So now let's imagine I'm out to dinner. I order a steak and my dining companion orders ceviche or sashimi or some really delicate scallops. How can I order a bottle that goes with both? Do you have any kind of go-to styles that pair with a wide range of different dishes?
Well, it's a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, trying to to pair Barossa Shiraz with oysters or things like that, Napa Valley Cab with scallops. I mean, these are things that fundamentally will never work. And in this case, I guess a wine list with a good by the glass option is the best way to attack that sort of situation. But failing that, there are a few tips and tricks, I guess, that you can look to do to appease everybody at the table. If your sort of mediating discussion, if your compromise situation doesn't work. So I would recommend for things like delicate seafood, trying to avoid oak. So if somebody really wants to drink red wine, wants to force the whole table to drink red wine, and you've got scallops, try and convince them to buy something that hasn't been oaked to within an inch of its life. But failing that in general, if the drinker is a bit more flexible, or the table is a bit more flexible, I really think that rosé is a really fantastic wine that is often overlooked gastronomically, but in the glass can behave a little bit like white wine and a little bit like red wine in order to appease and pair with a whole bunch of different preferences. So back when I was working in fine dining restaurants, we used to have a 12-course degustation. And if you were to walk in on any night and I had a few rosés on the pairing, it meant that they were pretty difficult dishes that I'd been given to pair. So rosé is a fantastic, flexible way to appease a whole bunch of different drinkers. And the good thing about rosé is that it's got the acidity to really cut through the richness of dishes, or to balance out freshness or aromats, herbs, Asian fusion. It's a really flexible style of wine. So don't forget about rosé. It's a great drink.
Yeah, it gets a bad rap too much. I agree. It's one of the most versatile wines around for pairing. All right, we're nearing our 20-minute mark, but I have a few more questions that came in. So let me see if I can cover a couple of these. Jed, would you ever recommend choosing the wine before the food?
It depends. So either choosing the wine before the food or bringing a special bottle from home is something that happens occasionally. So if you have a restaurant that allows you to bring that special bottle that you've been keeping for 20 years, that's a situation where I would think about the food, say less than the wine, if the wine's sort of the center of attention. Once again, it's sort of an inverse mission for the sommelier. I would approach the sommelier and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of drinking. I'm really interested in this bottle. Are there any dishes on your food menu that you'd recommend to pair with this? So once again, an open and honest conversation with the server is the best way to navigate that. But there's no problem pairing food around wine. And there are a lot of restaurants actually that are wine focused and do that on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's a good challenge for the team as well. I think some somms or servers would actually enjoy that challenge.
Yeah, very much so.
Wonderful. Let me see if we can get one more. Let's try this one. So often red with seafood is a no-no, but what if the seafood is in a tomato-based or richer and darker sauce?
That is a very good question. So immediately a very famous Tuscan fish stew from Tuscany in Italy comes to mind, from a city called Livorno, which sits on the coast. And that is a fish-based stew in tomato sauce that is drunk with light Chianti Classico. So Chianti that hasn't spent time in oak barrels. Mm-hmm. So the red wine with fish thing that people have heard is not a rule. And there are examples of where this is broken in regional cuisine. The other thing that I encourage you all to taste, if you haven't, is salmon and Pinot Noir. Salmon and Pinot Noir is a fantastic pairing, and a really great example of why red wine and fish should not be overlooked. That being said, both of these styles of wine, so Pinot Noir and Sangiovese, they're not wines that hold a lot of oak particularly well. So I would say, well, the style that we're looking for to pair with fish. So once again, if you do want to drink red wine with fish, make sure that it hasn't spent too much time in oak barrels, if any time at all, and you'll have a better experience.
Yeah, it's good advice. You know, when we approach pairing at WSET, as you very well know, you know, we pair the intensity of the wine with the intensity of the food. So if you kind of use that as a principle to pair red wine with fish, you know, not too much oak, as Gerard's saying, I think you can make it work. So unfortunately, we are out of time for today. Thank you all for your questions. Feel free to email us, write us on Instagram, WSET. We'd be happy to answer more. We hope everyone learned something from Gerard, who is just a wealth of knowledge about wine. Gerard, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope everyone enjoyed and enjoys their next outing at a restaurant when they're having a wonderful conversation with their sommelier and getting a great pairing to go with their dinner. So thank you so much, Gerard, for joining us.
Thank you, Christine, and thanks to everybody. Enjoy your weekend.